Hill, Dr. Manuel Scott, President Rowe, Dr. Shaw, Dr. Higgins, Dr. Wright, Dr. Johnny Bryant, and others. I think you would want me again, as has already been done, to thank this choir for this marvelously rich music tonight. In fact, they have created such a warm atmosphere here that the water is a little too hot for me to jump in right off. When I was a lad, my mother used to pour the bucket of water in a round tub, and she'd say to me, "Boy, don't get in that tub now. The water's too hot." And she'd paddle it around a while until it got cooler. So I'm going to paddle the water a little while until it gets bearable. Dr. Manuel Scott, Mr. President, who is one of a kind, sui generis, commanded me to come here on your behalf, and I am delighted to come again to Bishop College. President Curry has proven, not only in the case of Bishop, but perhaps even with less to work with tonight, that he can make much out of little. And I greatly appreciate that, sir. I talked with President Lassiter this morning, and to my amazement, I called for him, and I fully expected to say to the secretary, I just wanted him to know that I was in the city. And to my amazement, he answered the telephone himself. I was so taken aback that I'm not sure still that I said to him what I had planned to say. But I do want you to know, Mr. President, I arrived in the city safely. You know, I am always overwhelmed when I come to Texas. I was reared in Louisiana, and we heard that beyond the Sabine River, there was a race of people, gunslinging, but I found later that Texans are wonderful people. And I think the word I heard as a boy about that wild race of people who lived beyond the Sabine came out of a certain Louisiana defensiveness. Maturity has taught me that. You have all perhaps heard of the two men who met, and one said, "I'm from Texas, you can call me Tex." The other said, "I'm from Louisiana, don't call me Louise." There used to be a time when that kind of thing was more important than it is now. But I am a true believer in Texas, and I'll tell you the extent of my belief. I believe that in January 1985, the Dallas Cowboys won the Super Bowl. You can't get any stronger belief than that. I was deeply touched tonight at seeing President Curry stand here, because he is living proof, as Dr. George said, that one man can make the difference. And I'm delighted at the way President Lassiter has taken hold of this great and noble institution. I'm also delighted to be with my old and dear friend, Dr. C.A.W. His ministry and my ministry grew together in Louisiana. His grew up and mine grew. For 30-odd years, and I said this to some of you when I was last here, he propounded the principle that pepper would split the preacher's voice. He is a preacher of such notable gifts that I accepted what he said, but I never did adopt it. 30-odd years later, when he found out that there wasn't a thing to that, he said, old Clifton Walker at Trinity Church told me that. All up until that time, it was his own theory. And when it collapsed, it became Dr. Walker's theory. And he's gone on to heaven and cannot defend himself. But I know, I suppose, better than almost any living man, the secret of Caesar Clark's preaching, and if I feel led to do it the next time I appear, I want to preach, I guess, talk about what you might call a post-Easter sermon. And there are several reasons why I want to talk about this. In February of 1856, Charles Haddon Spurgeon, on a Sunday morning in the new Park Street Church, whose congregation would later worship in the Metropolitan Tabernacle, and where he would have a preaching ministry as far as hearers were concerned, unrivaled by any pastor in the English-speaking world. And on that Sunday morning in 1856, Spurgeon began that sermon by saying that he had been examining why so many churches were so staid and so chilled. And he said he tracked the apostolic preaching back to its source to find out what the difference was. It was not just in the fact that there was a different type of oratory inherited from the Greek orators, which later Christian preachers adopted. Nor was it to be found in the fact that the New Testament preachers did not preach in stated edifices. And he went on to say that nor was it that they did not take texts, though I'm not sure about Spurgeon on that, because at Pentecost, Peter did take a text. He said, from the book of Joel, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. But Spurgeon said that day that the reason why the apostolic preaching set the world on fire was that the New Testament preachers always preached the resurrection. At Pentecost, it was Peter's assertion that you crucified him and God raised him from the dead. And when they went up to the temple, Peter and John, in the aftermath of their healing, they said, this is no world-beating marvel, but this is a derivative miracle. For God raised him from the dead. And it was the preaching of the resurrection, said Spurgeon, that first aroused the ire of the council and brought the apostles, hailed the apostles before them for a hearing. And as soon as they got out, it was the preaching of the resurrection that they uttered. And if you follow the apostolic preaching, the people brought their gifts. Where's that in the 4th chapter? Because they preached the resurrection. I'm convinced that it is one of the chief achievements of Satan that we preach the resurrection only on Easter Sunday. For here is the central truth of the Christian faith. Here is what supremely sets it apart. And R.W. Dale was at Carr's Lane Church in Birmingham, successor to John Angel James, on a Saturday before Easter. He was reading an account of the resurrection, and it came upon him with a fresh force. Christ is actually alive. And he said, I must tell my people Christ lives. And after that, never a Sunday came in Carr's Lane Church but that an Easter anthem was sung in that congregation. And so I want to talk this morning, this evening, about 3 days that changed the world. You know, let me read this passage. For I delivered unto you first of all that which I also received. How that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he rose again the 3rd day according to the Scriptures. There are days, though they may be the flash points of a long smoldering circumstance. That passage is at the start of the 15th chapter of Paul's letter, first letter to the Corinthians. I hardly thought any preacher would not recognize anything from the 15th chapter of 1 Corinthians. There are days that alter the world. If you are ever a tourist, or if you have been a tourist in Quebec, first in upstate New York, they will point out Fort Ticonderoga, where the French General Louis Montcalm successfully defended the fort. And when you go to Quebec, they will carry you to the Plains of Abraham, the site of the battlefield between the English General Thomas Wolfe and the French General Louis Montcalm. And it is generally felt among historians that if the British General Wolfe had not prevailed on the battlefield on the Plains of Abraham on that day in September 1759, the French influence on this continent would have very likely continued, and this sermon might well be in French. But that day in September 1759 altered the course of the language of the North American continent. Well, closer to home. If in April, 1836, Santa Anna's armies at San Jacinto had prevailed on that day, this sermon might well be in Spanish. But there are days that alter the course of things. One day divides the student from the graduate, the pupil from the alumnus or the alumna. And how many I have seen countless bridegrooms perspiring, no sweating, because they knew the momentous hour drew near, that for better or worse would alter their lives forever. We Christian people have 3 days that altered the world, shook the world from center to circumference, and will affect events until time falls exhausted at the feet of eternity. 3 days that altered the direction of history, arrested the drift of time, and turned around the sequence of occurrence. 3 days. The first one, Friday. A hill shaped like a skull. An execution. A corpse. A tomb. What did it all mean? All right. Some of the noblest minds of these 2 millennia have wrestled with the meaning of that first day. Irenaeus and Origen, Augustine and Anselm, and Aquinas, and Barth, and Tilly, and Luther. What did it mean? Yes, sir. And there have been many theories as to what that first day meant. The legal theory that a law had been violated, a sentence was imposed, and on that cross, Christ accepted in himself the penalty. And then 500 years ago, Hugo Grotius, the Dutch theologian, propounded the theory that Calvary meant the wiping away of an embarrassment in God's governance of the universe, in removing an awful shame that a violation had occurred and had not been righted. And then, of course, there is the moral doctrine of what happened on that first day. That Christ showed in his exemplary way how far God would go to save his people. And there's the revelatory doctrine that God revealed the heartbeat of his love at Calvary, and at the same time unmasked the powers of evil. Took away from them their pretense of respectability. Pulled off from them their cloak of honor. And showed them a wicked government in alliance with a blasphemous religion, turned against the fairest that the world had ever seen. For the cross ever reveals the wickedness of men. And we see over and over again conniving political operators joined hand with prostituted religionists to crucify the best the world has ever seen. When that day had wrought its way, it was shown that Joseph Caiaphas, with all of his gold plates on, embroidered linen, stood on the side of hell. It ought to be a message to many of us with our gaudy capes. And poor women dressed as nurses hovering over us and fluttering with aspirin tablets and orange juice. All of these theories may well have truth in them, but neither one of them tells me everything about that first day. No, all of them together tell me what happened. As a boy, I could not read the account of our Lord's death without tears coming to my eyes, and I still cannot. For I know in some way that I've never been able to explain that he took a lick that was meant for me. I know that where the slate was all blotched and marred, he wiped it clean. And I know that he got under a load that I was meant to carry. And where the charges stood against me, he cleared them. And if in Eden I see a tree forbidden, at Calvary I see a tree forgiving.
Yes, sir.
And if in Eden I see a tree prohibited, at Calvary I see a tree provided. That in some way deeper than I can ever say, that he made it all right with my soul. He manumitted the slave's indebtedness, brought the exile back to his native land, put the orphan at the father's table and called him or her a child. I know that at Calvary, that first day, my condition was forever altered and changed, that I am now a child of the royal house. Was it for crimes that I had done? He groaned upon the tree. Amazing pity. Amazing pity. Grace unknown and love beyond degree. Well might the sun in darkness hide and shut his glories in when Christ, the mighty maker, died for man, the creature's sin. The first day. Of the second day. The scriptures do not speak much, but they are instructive. They speak, Peter in the 3rd chapter of the 1st letter at the 19th verse said that he was freed in the Spirit and went and preached to spirits in prison. Now, I am not under any warranty to preach any second probation, which doctrine gave rise to the whole Roman Catholic doctrine of purgatory. Those of us who have lost kin, who did not accept Christ, feel sometimes a strange sadness, but I am among those. And I do not know the meaning, the meaning of this cryptic passage, that he went and preached to the spirits in prison. Now, do I have warrant to preach a second probation? No. But I do read again that word that our Lord spoke about a shepherd. Was he talking about himself? Who left the 90 and now and went searching, yes, sir, for one lost sheep who had strayed, beguiled by some tempting tuft of grass, or led on by some inviting waterfall. Until I do not know how long until is. And I have no warrant to preach a second probation, and I shall not. But not until darkness falls, but until. Not until the chill of evening comes, but until. Not until briars cut the shepherd's hands, but until. Not until stones cut and lacerate the feet, but until. Find it. And so I leave the second day. I do not know what he preached. Did he take that text from the old book, Arise, shine, for thy light is come? I do not know. Or did he utter again the words he spoke when he addressed himself to the deepest places of Lazarus' death and said, I am the resurrection and the life? I do not know. But he preached to the spirits chained in darkness. In vain? I do not know.
Why don't you say that?
I leave the second day.
Yes, sir.
The third day, which ought to be in all of our preaching, all of the time. All of the time. Oh, my brother, you have no better word to preach than that third day. It belongs not to one Sunday of the year. It belongs to the charisma of the Christian proclaimer every time. The third day.
Yes.
In the imagination of the eye, of the mind.
Yes.
Yes. I seem to see night beginning to disappear.
Yes.
Morning begins to draw a thin pencil of light across the eastern sky. The moon begins to rush out of the sky, the queen of the night, to make way for the king of the day to rise. The sky begins to blush shyly at the love call of the dawning.
Yes, sir.
As morning comes. The strong Son of God shakes himself. That grave which held Adam strains under his movements. That grave which somewhere in the lonely, lost summits of Nebo held Moses begins to shiver. That grave from which Abraham could not be extricated begins to tremble. That grave which the lyrical poetry of Isaiah could not move begins to tremble. That grave which was not charmed by the music of David begins to tremble. Look at it. Look at it. The strong Son of God lays aside those garments dipped in blood, clothes himself in the glorious apparel of his lordship, steps forth into the morning light, declares, I am he that was dead. Behold, I'm alive forevermore. I've got the keys. I've got the keys of hell and death. Christ lives. Of course, we ought not merely repeat that in any parrot fashion. We ought to apply it to every circumstance of life. Christ lives. Right. As you drive along Stemmons to the freeway, Christ lives. Women preparing their dinner, Christ lives. Men going to their office, Christ lives. I have just come through a great teaching and testing time, as many of you have. I have passed through surgery. And I have come out of it surer of one thing than I've ever been before. Christ lives. Lives in me. Christ lives. I do not know how long I have now, but as long as I am to preach the gospel every time I preach it, in one way or another, I shall declare Christ lives. Let every tyrant pressing his heel upon the necks of the oppressed know Christ lives. Let every faker in every high political office, wherever it is, know Christ lives. Christ lives. And if thousands are still to hear my voice, as please God they have in the years gone by, I shall declare to them, Christ lives. But if I am to end in some humble and rustic chapel, preaching to some simple people in some backwater of the land, I shall say to them, Christ lives. And when time hoarsens this voice, and whatever ring there is it upon which thousands have heard, have listened, I shall whisper, however throatily, Christ lives. When I come down to the slippery shores of Jordan, I have but one crossing password. Christ lives. I shall pass through its swelling current with those words upon my heart. Christ lives. When I stand on the shores of everlasting deliverance, I shall repeat those words. Christ lives. My spirit will sweep through the celestial plains. I will cry again. Christ lives. When the gates of new life open to me, I will shout again, Christ lives. As I go stately stepping up the broad avenues of the glory land, I shall salute angels and archangels, prophets, priests, and kings with the glorious word, Christ lives. When I kneel down before the lily white throne, at his nail-pierced feet, surrender my commission and thank him that he made me a preacher down here, I shall cry once more, Christ lives, lives.
Does he live? Do you know he lives? How do you know him? He lives in me. Let's not move now. Let's not move now. Dr. Clark, Dr. Mingo has some important announcements that we need to hear. Dr. Clark.
Yes, Lord. Thank you.
All right, we're going to have some singing now.
Watch that.
All right.
Will you please remain seated? The President has a very important announcement. Brother pastors, you wouldn't want your people to move on here on Sunday morning. In fact, we're in the chapel, but I've heard too much about Christ without giving somebody an invitation to know him. Somebody here tonight may feel the urge of an awakened conscience Some sinner may want to be saved. Some backslider reclaimed. Or some unchurched Christian may want a church home. Don't let the devil make you shake. I know this is a chapel. This is a college, but when God's people are there and the gospel preaching, that's church. If you're here while the choir sings, just come down and make your desires known. Come to the Lord.